Welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. This week's program focuses on the persistence of terror groups such as the Islamic State, Daesh in some parts, Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab militants. They all began as an ideology before becoming violent. The only difference is that the Islamic State is more broader, looking to contain more territories around the world, propagating an ideology of an Islamic caliphate, which is pretty much what the others are doing. The US-led coalition has been pounding the militants as much as they can, but seeing pictures like these, the recent bombings in the city of Damascus which killed 20 people on Saturday, or isolated attacks by Boko Haram in the northeast, or the recent attacks by Al-Shabaab on Ethiopian troops serving with the African Union's AMISOM. Our focus is to measure progress made in the war on terror. Our guest is Dr. Yinka Olomojobi, a scholar and researcher on terrorism. But let's begin with a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. We begin with the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, Mrs. Abracadabra Arawa, criticizing a statement made by a former Indian Goa Chief Minister, Ravi Naik, concerning Nigerians. According to Mrs. Dabiri Arawa, Mr. Naik had referred to Nigerians as, quote, Negroes causing problems in Goa and parts of India, saying they create problems everywhere. We do not want Nigerian tourists. He had reportedly gone on to suggest that Nigerians be asked to leave India. Mrs. Dabiri Arawa said Mr. Naik's statement was personal to him and does not represent the views of the Indian government, which will not descend so low to use derogatory words even for Indians in Nigeria who are involved in legal activities, but would allow the law to take its course. She's called on Nigerians in diaspora to be law-abiding, as any Nigerian found guilty of breaking the laws of any land will face the consequences. US President Barack Obama has condemned the shooting of 50 people at a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida.
We grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people. We pray for their families who are grasping for answers with broken hearts. We stand with the people of Orlando who have endured a terrible attack on their city. Although it's still early in the investigation, we know enough to say that this was an act of terror and an act of hate. And as Americans, we are united in grief, in outrage, and in resolve to defend our people.
His words re-echo that of Florida Governor Rick Scott, who described it as clearly an act of terrorism.
This is clearly an act of terrorism. It's sickening. It should make every American angry. Would it ever happen anywhere in our country? The first thing you think about is you just can't imagine what these families are going through. The families are still waiting to find out what happened to their loved ones. The most important thing we can do right now, as law enforcement is doing their job, and our healthcare workers are doing everything they can for the victims, is pray for everybody. Thank God we have the law enforcement we have at the state, the Orange County Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, FDLE, all the federal agencies. Everybody's coordinated their activities very well. It's heroic, the individuals that went into the building knowing there was an active shooter. So we need to be very thankful that there are individuals that are willing to risk their lives to save other lives, and they clearly saved other lives.
An assistant FBI agent in charge said there are suggestions the suspects may have leanings towards extremist ideology, but that cannot be definitively proven. The gunman, eventually identified by officials as Omar Mateen, was said to have been carrying an assault-type rifle and a handgun and had some type of device on him. Police say he was not on a terrorism watch list, although he was being investigated for an unrelated criminal act. While relatives of victims have been gathering at local hospitals, desperate for news of their loved ones, French President François Hollande has condemned the mass killing with horror and expressed France's full support with the American authorities and the American people. Finally, the Russian Foreign Ministry says any intervention by a third party in the South China Sea will only raise tension in the region. The ministry's spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, told a press conference that development in the South China Sea is closely related to security and stability in the Western Pacific. She said all related parties should use political and diplomatic approach and hold direct dialogues as well as discussions without resorting to force. Russia believes the disputes should be resolved based on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, as well as the Declaration on the Code of Conduct on the South China Sea. On to our lead topic, which is anchored on the latest Islamic State attack in the city of Damascus, with 20 people killed and the number expected to rise. Now, I have to warn you, some of the footage can be quite disturbing.
ISIS' latest attacks in Syria happened near the country's holiest Shiite Muslim shrine, Sayyida Zainab, in Damascus. Footage from local television showed debris, mangled cars and wrecked shops in an area where at least 3 bomb attacks claimed by the same Islamic State have killed and wounded scores of people this year. While the death toll is being disputed, it is likely as many as 20 people were killed in Saturday's attack. The Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack, saying 2 of its suicide bombers had blown themselves up and operatives had detonated an explosives-laden car. The Sayyida Zainab Shrine is a major attraction for thousands of Shiite militia recruits from Iraq and Afghanistan who go there before being assigned to front lines where they fight against the Sunni rebel groups fighting to topple Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Over in Iraq, security forces have been pushing against the terrorists inside the built-up district of Fallujah, the ISIS main stronghold west of Baghdad. For the last couple of weeks, they have been making steady progress to regain Fallujah, but victory is still far. The city has been under the Islamic State stronghold since January 2014, when they raised their flag, before sweeping through much of Iraq's north and west, declaring a caliphate several months later. ISIS' reach has extended beyond Syria and Iraq to also include Libya, where it has found veritable ground for success, despite an offensive by forces allied with the country's UN-backed unity government. More than 100 from government-backed brigades have been killed and 5 times as many wounded since the campaign to recapture Sirte, the city on Libya's Mediterranean coast, which has become the first city to fall to the militants outside of Syria and Iraq. Since announcing its presence there in February last year, the militants' presence has grown to over 5,000-strong contingent. Other terrorist groups such as the Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab have at one time or the other pledged allegiance to the Islamic State, taking on its ideals and copying its style of operations. Though driven far into the Sambisa forest by the Nigerian military alongside the multinational joint task force, Boko Haram attacks have resurfaced in recent weeks in Nigeria's northeast. The United States recently said there was no proof of allegiance between the group and the Islamic State, but that is not the main concern for the Nigerian military. Capturing the group's leader is. Al-Shabaab, on the other hand, continues to threaten the peace in Somalia. Recent attacks on Ethiopian soldiers with AMISOM is only a reality as to how much work still needs to be done.
When we come back after the break.
Boko Haram has said that they agreed with Western education. And the reason why is because the people who have been pulverized have found that the leaders who have been trained by Western education have not been able to give them equitable education, equitable living.
Join us for the discussion with Dr. Yinka Olomojobi.